all of these sound bites before the bottom of the hour, but this is Representative Trey Gowdy from South Carolina. This guy's one of the real horses. He's a thoroughbred in the House of Representatives, one of my favorite guys. He's on my top 10 lawmakers on Capitol Hill. And he's talking here yesterday at a hearing in the House of Representatives with Simon Lazarus. Simon Lazarus is the senior counsel to the Constitutional Accountability Center. That is his role. He's the senior counsel to the Constitutional Accountability Center. So here's a guy by his title is supposed to know something about the Constitution because the senior counsel, that means he's an attorney, supposed to be a constitutional attorney. He is the senior counsel, so he's not some kind of junior clerk. This guy's at the top of the legal pyramid at the Constitutional Accountability Center, and the word accountability is in there. In other words, the job of this center, as I would take it, would be to see that people and lawmakers are held accountable to the Constitution. What else could it be? It's the Constitutional Accountability Center. So are our lawmakers being held accountable to the Constitution or not? That's the job of this Simon Lazarus guy. Now, here is Trey Gowdy asking some penetrating questions to Simon Lazarus. Clip 1. Let's listen.
It strikes me that the law can require action or forbid action. The law can forbid the possession of child pornography. The law can, in some instances, require you to file an income tax return. Mr. Lazarus, is the chief executive constitutionally capable of ignoring both categories of law?
Well, as I said several times, Congressman Gowdy, the President cannot refuse to apply or enforce a law for policy reasons.
Well, let's analyze that for a second. Congress decided in its collective wisdom that if you possess X amount of a controlled substance, you are going to get X amount of time in prison. You may like mandatory minimums, you may not like them. This administration summarily dispensed with that law. So my question to you, again, is can the chief executive fail to enforce categories of law that are both permissive and mandatory?
No, it is well established that the executive branch has prosecutorial discretion to decline enforcement.
And what are the limits of that prosecutorial discretion?
You know, very frankly, I'm not an expert on that.
Well, let me ask you this. Can the president, let's assume that a statute required you to show 2 pieces of identification to purchase a firearm. Can the chief executive knock that down to 1?
I guess I'd have to know a little bit more, but I would...
It's a very simple fact pattern. You have to show 2 forms of ID to possess or purchase a firearm. Can the chief executive, under his pardon authority or his prosecutorial discretion authority, knock that down to just 1 form of identification?
Well, I'm not aware of limits on the president's pardon authority.
So you would say he could?
Under the pardon authority, the president can pardon just about anyone, not that he should. No.
Even before the act is committed?
That's the reason for...
Can he do it before the act is committed? That's my question.
I'm sorry?
Can he do it before the act is committed?
That's above my pay grade. I don't really know that.
That's amazing to me. That is just amazing. This guy is supposed to be the senior counsel. Well, he is the senior counsel at something called the Constitutional Accountability Center. And he's there. He's got enough credibility to be testifying before the Congress of the United States. And he says, I'm not an expert on that question. Can the chief executive office, can the executive branch, can it simply refuse to enforce laws that have been passed by Congress that both forbid behavior and require behavior? Can they take an entire category of law and set it aside and just say, we're not going to enforce that? And he says, well, I'm not an expert on that. Well, crime eminently. What are you doing there then? I mean, your title says you're the senior counsel at the Constitutional Accountability Center. So you're supposed to be the guy that knows something about the Constitution and the constitutional limits. And then he says, well, the executive branch has prosecutorial discretion. Now, what that means is prosecutors, and Gowdy will visit this in one of the following sound bites, you know, a prosecutor will sometimes have a choice to make in individual cases. I think this guy did it, But do I have enough evidence to get a conviction in court? Do I have sufficient eyewitnesses? Do I have sufficient evidence from the crime scene that makes me believe that in good faith I can put this guy behind bars? I can get a conviction. I've got enough evidence here to convict. This is a wise use of taxpayer money. That's on an individual case-by-case basis. So prosecutors have to have that kind of discretion so that they're using taxpayer funds wisely. But what Gowdy is at, because what the administration is doing, and this is what Gowdy's referring to here, the Congress passed a law that said, look, if you have X amounts of a controlled substance, you get X number of years in jail. That's the law. That's the law that Congress passed. And Eric Holder said, no, we're not. We're just going to trash that whole thing. We're just going to dump it. We're not going to put anywhere in the prosecutorial phase. We're not going to put down how much of this controlled substance this individual was in possession of. We're just going to refuse to enforce that part of the code. And this is bizarre to me because this guy is citing the president's pardon authority. Because the president has the power of the pardon. Apparently, this guy, head of the Constitutional Accountability Center, believes that the president can pick and choose which categories of law he enforces. Well, the pardon category, again, is just like prosecutorial discretion. It's on a case-by-case basis. I actually got a pardon request for somebody in Idaho before President Bush, before he left office back in 2009. It's a specific case. Here, I believe, is a specific example of government overreach, of government tyranny, of illegal government behavior. This guy wound up behind bars for 18 months. I think he deserves to be pardoned. President Bush, will you pardon him? And we got Senator Mike Crapo's office to put the information before President Bush and his people. Now, President Bush was very stingy with the pardon power, didn't do it. But the whole point is a pardon is a case-by-case basis. It's not an authority to refuse to enforce entire categories of the law. And this guy ought to know better. Back in 2.
We need to be cultivating in our own hearts and in our congregation